What if one book could unravel the deepest mysteries of your mind or drive you to the edge of madness? Carl Jung's Red Book, hidden for 50 years, is no ordinary text. It's a psychedelic journey into the unconscious, filled with demons, gods, and visions that predicted World War I. In this video, we'll uncover why this book was locked away, what secrets Jung revealed, and how it might change the way you see yourself. Stay with us to discover the truth about the book that some say no one should read, while others believe everyone must. Let's begin. Some say it's a mystical diary, others notes of a psychotic. This story begins, as good stories do, with a disappearance, or rather, with concealment. The book in question was created over 16 years, starting in 1913. Its author, Carl Jung. What he hid behind these colorful pages was known to practically no one, not even his closest colleagues. Early in his career, Jung was a close colleague of Sigmund Freud. The latter called him his adopted eldest son and heir. However, in 1912, their relationship abruptly ended. Jung published a work, Psychology of the Unconscious, in which he rejected Freud's key ideas. After that, almost all of Jung's professional associates turned away from him. In response to this sharp isolation and professional collapse from 1913 to 1914, Jung experienced 12 powerful visions, which could be called prophetic. These apocalyptic visions occurred just a few months before the start of World War I. Jung was 38 at the time, and it can be safely said that he was on the verge of an existential midlife crisis. Every evening, he secluded himself in his study and began a descent within. What he found there, he did not interpret as symptoms. These were images that came from within. Heroes, demons, elders, mythical creatures. Sometimes he spoke with them, and sometimes they spoke with him. Later, he compared this period of his life, this confrontation with the unconscious, as he called it, to an experiment with mescaline. The visions came in a continuous stream, like stones falling on his head. I often had to cling to the table, he recalled, to keep from falling apart. If he had been a patient in a psychiatric clinic, he would have been told he had a nervous disorder and advised to ignore the circus going on in his head. But as a psychiatrist and a person with an extraordinary creative streak, he chose a different method, to tear down the wall between the rational self and the unconscious. After all, in psychiatry, as it's known, whoever puts on the white coat first is the doctor. He recorded these encounters in a special manuscript called Liber Novus. Later, it would simply be called the Red Book. There are things you read cautiously, slowly, as if the text might bite you. The Red Book is one of those. On its pages, you can encounter an ancient Egyptian serpent, a demonic woman, a sage, a vagabond, a Christ-like figure, a murderer, and many others. They don't resemble characters from a scientific work. They act freely, chaotically, with a kind of frightening autonomy. This book defies classification. It's neither a diary, nor a dissertation, nor a philosophical treatise, nor a fairy tale, nor a textbook. It's a kind of inner altar. Jung wrote in it calligraphically with red ink on handmade pages, drawing miniatures reminiscent of medieval manuscript illuminations. He treated it as a sacred act, perhaps even too sacred. The book tells the story of Jung trying to confront his own demons as they emerge from the shadows. Jung travels through the land of the dead, falls in love with a woman who, as he later realizes, is his sister. He is crushed by a giant serpent, and in one horrifying moment, he eats the liver of a small child. In one scene, even the devil sharply criticizes him. That's exactly why the book was hidden. For years, it lay in his study like an artifact, and after his death in 1961, it was kept in a safe. Whenever someone asked to see the Red Book, his family members, without hesitation or politeness, said, no, the book was personal, deeply personal work. For years, his relatives debated whether to publish the book. Some believed it could ruin his reputation as a scientist, while others thought that without it, he would remain misunderstood. The decision was not easy. The name that often comes up in this story is Sonu Shamdasani. You can see his name on the cover. He is a historian of psychology. He spent years reconstructing the text's origins, cross-referencing drafts, translating and consulting archives. It was largely due to his persistence that the book saw the light of day. In the 1990s, Shamdasani began negotiations with Jung's family about publishing the book. The negotiations were complex and lasted nearly a decade. As Shamdasani writes in the preface, psychologists sought to overcome the limitations of science and began exploring the same territory as artists and writers. From all sides, people were searching for new forms to convey authentic inner reality. In 2009, nearly 100 years later, the Red Book was finally published. The world saw what it wasn't ready to see in the 1920s, the 1970s, and perhaps still isn't ready for today. When you first pick up the Red Book, there's a strange sensation, as if you're not watching a person write a book, but someone writing through him, and that someone isn't necessarily a supernatural entity. It's what Jung himself called the soul, an autonomous structure within the psyche. He spoke with it, asked it for advice. Sometimes it argued, sometimes it was silent. "My soul, where are you?" So begins one of his entries. The question sounds like the cry of someone lost in a thicket, but it's not for drama's sake, it's for contact. Jung didn't try to explain anything. He lived in these images like a person who found himself in another world where none of the usual maps work. He wasn't sure who he was there. An explorer, an exile, a medium. The question remains open. However, regarding the significance of what was contained in the book, Jung was firm. "All my works," he later recalled, "stemmed from those initial fantasies and dreams." But before we get to the essence of the book, let's try to answer an important question. What is the unconscious? Jung thought a lot about the unconscious. For him, it was the central mechanism in the process of individuation. Individuation is the process of transformation in which the personal and collective unconscious come into consciousness and are integrated into a whole personality. Thus, the unconscious consists of two parts, the personal and the collective. The personal is the specific experience of an individual, including repressed memories or inner conflicts. The collective is a much deeper layer. Jung believed it contains universal images and motifs that recur in myths, fairy tales, and religious texts across different cultures. These images he called archetypes. While working on the Red Book, Jung didn't just explore the unconscious, he actively engaged with it. He allowed images from the depths of the psyche to enter consciousness, described them, analyzed them, drew them, and conversed with them. This technique is called active imagination, somewhat akin to meditation. Thus, the Red Book is a profound psychological experiment aimed at integrating unconscious content into conscious life. Blinded by pride and arrogance, I long sought to push away the spirit of the depths. I think this is a state familiar to each of us. The hectic, result-oriented rhythm of our society makes us deaf to the call of our inner nature. We are too focused on the demands of the artificial external world, and in this process, we lose our soul. Yet it begins to slowly, almost crawling, return to us. If a person doesn't find their soul, they are consumed by the horror of emptiness, and fear drives them like a whip, again and again, in desperate attempts and blind desire for the empty things of the world. My friends, it is wise to nourish the soul, lest you breed dragons and demons in your heart. The loss of connection with the soul breeds neuroses, distorts behavior, and destroys relationships at all levels of society. Most of the world's ugliness, as he believed, is a consequence of our alienation from our own psyche. Jung repeatedly confronts destructive images, murder, violence, descent into madness. These are not personal problems. These are archetypal forms that are activated when you play the good person for too long. The Red Book shows the unseen shadow becomes a monster if you don't notice it. Civilized, refined, bourgeois in his pince-nez, Carl Jung feels lost when he sees that within him lives a murderer, a seducer, and a fool. But he realizes these are not enemies, but exiled aspects of his soul. The Red Book is a chronicle of the shadow of an era. It's important that Jung wrote this book in the midst of World War I, sensing that not only he, but all of Europe was under the sway of the repressed. He foresaw, if each person doesn't confront their shadow, it will crash upon the world collectively as war. What do you think of the essence of hell? Hell is when the depths catch up with you, bringing all that you no longer are and are no longer capable of. Hell is when you cannot achieve what you would like to achieve. Hell is when you have to think, feel, and do all that you know you don't want. Hell is when you know that everything serious you've planned is laughable. Everything refined is at the same time crude. Everything good is at the same time bad. Everything high is at the same time low. And every good deed is at the same time an evil one. The deepest hell is at the same time not hell, but a joyful heaven. Not heaven in itself, but in some sense heaven and in some sense hell. Such is the ambiguity of God. He is born from dark ambiguity and rises to bright ambiguity, and any clarity leads to death. You say, the Christian God is unambiguous. He is love. But what could be more ambiguous than love? Jung's relationship with God was not simple. He wrote extensively about Christianity, as well as Eastern religions and all sorts of ancient cults, trying to understand religion from a psychological perspective. Throughout the book, he repeatedly encounters the image of God and reflects on these encounters. In one vision, he must kill a figure riding a chariot made of the bones of the dead. Presumably, this is God. After this, the spirit of the depths comes to him and says, "The highest truth is the same as the absurd. The path to truth is open only to those who have no meaning." Then Jung tries to make sense of this and writes, "That night my life was in danger, for I had to kill God, not in a duel. For who among mortals can kill a god in a duel? You can only reach your God as a murderer if you want to overcome him. But this is the bitterest thing for mortals. Our gods want to be overcome because they need renewal. If people kill their rulers, they do so because they cannot kill their gods and don't know that they must kill the god within themselves. If God grows old, he turns into a shadow, into nonsense, and departs. The greatest truth becomes the greatest lie. The brightest day is followed by the darkest night. Just as day cannot exist without night, meaning cannot exist without the absurd, and vice versa." This passage can be interpreted in various ways, but two key ideas stand out: the absurd and the death of God. Trying to connect these two concepts, Jung reflects extensively on this. For him, the death of God is not some vulgar street atheism or rejection of religion as such, but rather an opportunity for its rethinking. It's also about the inner image of God that lives in every person. According to Jung, God must die to give us a chance for spiritual renewal. We must break free from this obsessive adherence to external, superficial paths and instead turn our attention inward to our own soul. The absurd, in his view, is the boundary state between man and God. He writes directly, "The highest truth is the absurd." We encounter this sense of the absurd in our attempts to find meaning, but in reality, it is in this absurd that meaning is hidden. It seems illogical, but Jung asserts truth lives beyond the rational. He often turns to dual concepts, good-evil, light-darkness, beautiful-ugly, and tries to explain that God cannot be something one-sided. He writes, "I realize that God cannot be found in absolute beauty, goodness, seriousness, or sublimity. Once, God was exactly there, but the new God will be relative. If God is only beauty and goodness, how can he encompass the fullness of life? Beautiful and repulsive, good and evil, funny and serious, human and inhuman. How can a person live in God if God encompasses only one half of them? To the extent that the Christianity of this age lacks madness, it lacks divine life, divine madness. In his fantasies, an interesting character appears, Philemon. In the Red Book, the description of Philemon is as follows. After a long search, I found a small house in the countryside. Before it grew tulips. Here lives Philemon, a magician, along with his wife. Philemon is one of those magicians who could not defeat old age, but he lives with it with dignity. His wife does the same. Their interests have become simple, almost childlike. They tend to their tulips and tell each other about new flowers that have bloomed. Their days pass in soft, half-shadowed light, sanctified by memories of the past and slightly anxious about the future. Philemon is a character mentioned in the Bible. He is close to the Apostle Paul, and his name translates to loving or attached. Why Jung chose to connect him with magic is not entirely clear. Perhaps it reflects his interest in mysticism during that period. Jung also wrote, "It is a mistake to believe that there are magical practices that can be learned. Magic cannot be understood. You can only understand what aligns with reason. Magic, however, aligns with the irrational, and that is beyond understanding. The world is structured not only by reason, but also by the irrational. Perhaps by speaking of magic, Jung meant everything we cannot explain: the unconscious, chaos, chance, synchronicity. Philemon is the one who possesses magic and thus deeper knowledge. He was to Jung what Zarathustra was to Nietzsche. Apparently for Jung, it was important to establish a connection with such figures born of myth creating imagination, which was lost in the rational world of his time. Roughly speaking, with the advent of technology, magic disappeared from the world. We often see such a plot in anime. As you can see, the Red Book is open to many interpretations. It can be read as a novel, a mythological text, or even the notes of a madman. But that's precisely its charm and power. Yes, anyone can pour their thoughts into symbolic and abstract forms, but Jung did it so uniquely that he created his own style, called Jungian. Before the Red Book, Jung was a renowned psychiatrist. After it, he became something else. Now he's considered almost a bodhisattva, but I'd be cautious with that. Don't forget that Jung was just a man who simply tried to explore the world by following his own fantasies. And just as Jung was always against dogmatism in religion or science, constantly challenging authorities, God, Freud, we too should refrain from elevating him to a cult. Be careful with Jung's ideas. They can reshape your cognitive system. Personally, I only use the concepts that help me. For example, the concept of the shadow. He drew a map. As is known, any map is not the territory, but it can be used to navigate. In his map, the personal unconscious communicates with the collective through images. If it helps you, use it. If not, don't use it. Find others. Or as Jung said, I was forced to seriously ask myself, what myth are you living in? I found no answer and had to admit that I don't live within a myth, but merely wander in the fog of my theoretical constructs, which I increasingly began to distrust. So, in the most natural way, I decided to find my myth. I considered it the task of tasks. For, I said to myself, how can I understand another person if I don't understand myself? Here's a question you can ask yourself. What myth am I living in? And here we are in the 21st century, flipping through this heavy, beautiful book like an artifact from another era. We are not only psychologists and historians, we are those who, at some point, felt that the usual answers no longer work. Something has come unstuck. Something needs to be brought back into the conversation. Jung, in his book, doesn't provide a methodology or promise results. He only shows, if you descend, you might find. But not necessarily what you wanted. Many seek themselves in the Red Book, their myth, their images, their right to a dialogue with the soul. Some leave without understanding anything, while others return, unable to let go. Grand epithets like the work of a great thinker are hardly fitting here. Rather, it's a dossier, an archive, evidence, a trace that Jung left. And not even for us, but for himself. We peeked in and now can't forget. Today, the Red Book is studied in universities, quoted in psychology books, and its illustrations are hung on walls as reproductions. It has become a cultural phenomenon, but there's something wrong with that because it cannot be tamed. It cannot be understood as a philosophical text or mastered as a method. It slips away. Its essence lies in the feeling it leaves behind, an electric trace. If something stirred inside you, it means you read it right. When we say, what would Jung say about our time? We've already missed the point because Jung wouldn't say anything. He would show, he would go within and bring back another scene, another image, another figure, and we'd feel uneasy again. And perhaps we'd become a little more whole. Some believe no one should read this book, others believe everyone must. The book is downright psychedelic. I even had an idea for a script where Hunter Thompson comes to Carl Jung and interviews him. but then I thought such a crossover might not resonate with everyone. This was just a brief excursion into this vast, vibrant, and frightening book. If you're intrigued, I recommend exploring it yourself. And of course, thank you for watching.